a spring in your step. There is a twinkle in your eye.
I can throw a rhyme down for you real quick. Yes, they call me Thrill. They say that I'm the man. You disagree, how could you? Let me make you understand.
Should we bring her on the show? Can anybody find me? And there she is.
Fresh as some bread, pulled right from the oven. When you feel rejected, you get some my loving.
Take on me.
She looks wonderful. Mom looks amazing.
Somebody to. Okay, more bugger off now. I've got to show it to you.
Like that?
Joseph Jaffe, ladies and gentlemen.
You just made the new intro of the show. And now, speaking of a leader, a story leader that moves things forward, I get to welcome Chris Brogan. Chris runs Chris Brogan Media, and he created the Story Leader System to help leaders develop personal leadership in their teams, even in today's times, at a distance. He's the New York Times best-selling author of 9, count them, 9 books, and he's currently working on his 10th. You can learn more at chrisbrogan.com, but more importantly, you can learn more from him right now. Welcome to the show, Chris Brogan.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here, Joseph. Thank you for having me on, and I brought my hydration, so I wanted to celebrate with you. It's going to be a banner day.
It has to be. It has to be because you are on the show. So, you know, I called you the pioneer at the beginning, and I've been called the pioneer. And then I thought to myself, maybe this whole idea of pioneers and settlers, maybe we need a refresh, or maybe we don't. But I don't know what you thought about that.
Well, it's to me, it's always kind of funny. It's funny to think about people who like pioneered settling the new world here in the United States, for instance. They were just walking through a whole bunch of people's backyards and, you know, putting down new flags on someone else's land where they already had flags. They just couldn't see them, and saying, well, we discovered this. And I always think about that when I discover things, when I pioneer things. We all invent things that someone else already discovered. We just don't know it. In comedy, it's a big thing where people get really upset when other people appropriate each other's jokes. But there's 2 ways that happens. One is someone does full on steal someone's jokes, and you can't watch the body of their work and see the proof and not think that they're not stealing. But there's so many people who just get a similar idea. There are so many times where, I just saw a comedian today, a very, beloved in the U.S. comedian, make a joke about the fact that, she keeps waiting for, I can't think of his name, Ashton Kutcher, to jump out and say, "You've been punked." But I saw that joke 3 months ago. Now, I think she doesn't know that's been a joke kind of around the way. I don't think she's trying to appropriate it. But I guess what I'm saying is one of the first things you think of as a pioneer is maybe I'm not that special. What I take from being a pioneer, and then I'll breathe. What I take from being a pioneer is that the way it's most seen by me is Chris took a lot of those arrows in the back, and now we could do that thing that he got yelled at for doing. And that's, I'll own that. I don't mind. A lot of my early business ideas and concepts, I guess probably most famously in 2006 when I was one of the first bloggers to take a sponsored post, and everyone pooped their drawers and thought, oh my God, the world's over. And now everyone's asking, how do you get sponsors? I was down for it. I was excited to try some content meets sponsorship. And I thought that, there was nothing wrong with it. I still don't. I'm glad that I opened that door. I guess I wish I had more world-changing door opens, Joseph, but that's what I got for you.
No, but they have, and there've been so many, and we'll talk about many of them, but also where you are now. You know what I've learned through this process is that we are dynamic, right? We're fluid, we're changing. We're never stuck on one thing. We're certainly not stuck in the past. And I think maybe people that are stuck in the past, I feel bad for them because they're unable to just keep moving forward. And that's why, we'll get to story leading in a moment. But, I don't know, you inspired me to start a new segment in the show, which, you know, I do a lot of new things, and often they, you know, they work, and most of the time probably they don't. And so I decided to start something called 3 Things I Didn't Know About You. And they're not earth-shattering. The first is, I feel that anyone who's anyone in social media is either Canadian or from Boston. But it turns out that you're actually from Maine. So that's the first thing I found out about you. And if I could settle anywhere in the world right now, it would be probably in Algonquin, Maine. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Where about in Maine are you from?
So that part of Maine is what we jokingly call fake Maine, because I'm from the capital, which is Augusta, which is the least impressive part of Maine to ever visit. It is
not impressive.
All government buildings and medical buildings. That's all you get there. Not country enough to be the country. Absolutely not city enough to be considered a capital city. But Augusta, Maine. So I love Algonquin. I love Portland, that whole, you know, southern area. Where Augusta, if you go out towards the coast from Augusta, you come to a place called Belfast, Maine. That is a swell place because that's one of the cores of the Maine lobster industry, and you can get those delightful little beasties right out of the water and have an incredible feast for far less than what people pay everywhere else.
I guess you're now an honorary Canadian, so there you go. The second thing I found out about you that I didn't know is that you and I are quite close in age. Both of us born in 1970. Hopefully that was muffled by the poor speakers. So we're both celebrating milestones over the next, I guess, 6 months. Mine's December 24th. So happy birthday, by the way. Did I wish you a happy birthday? I hope I
probably
did. I hope I did on air. And the third actually is, I mean, I knew you were a prolific author and a writer and a speaker, but I didn't really realize that you've written self-help books, and I actually love the departures. I mean, I know you for Trust Agents, talking about being a pioneer. I mean, by the way, let's get to the other two in a second. When did you write Trust Agents?
It was published in the fall of 2009, and there's actually a 10th anniversary edition that really should have come out last year, but we were a little lazy finishing it. So there's a 10th anniversary slight edit coming out in a few months.
I almost feel like I was at Inbound seeing Julian Smith talking about Trust Agents. In fact, I'm pretty sure I was there, and how excited he was for the book coming out. But, you know, you talk about being ahead of your time, and maybe this is intuitive to all of us, but the concept of trust, has it ever been more relevant and important than now?
One of the things I think about the book, I've done this a few times. I almost never say good things about myself. So someone mark it down. I've only been somewhat prescient twice in my life. Chip is absolutely right by that comment, by the way. Absolutely true. I was prescient to do my very first ever podcast. It was called Fat Guy Gets Fit, because what I felt like is all I have to do is never quite get fit, and I'll always have content for the show. The other was that trust will never really go out of style. We somewhat, hey, Ted Rubin, we never denied that we stole part of our idea about writing this book from David Maister and Charlie Green, who wrote The Trusted Advisor, like the best book on trust ever. We just wrote it like two idiots instead of like two very smart businessmen. And so the idea that trust will ever go out of style, trust is a problem, right? It's a problem that we try to solve for all the time. And we even stole twice in two different books, David Maister and Charlie Green's formula for trust, because the trust equation was so perfect. How could we ever fix it? And so we go around telling people, you know, this might be important. You should maybe figure out trust. And it just never ends. And especially in this day and age right now, where we get the most interesting storylines from even just one man, that we have an endless array of things to learn.
But I think it's almost like, you know, when somebody says, trust me, you probably shouldn't. When someone says, can I be honest with you? Or if I'm being honest, they probably aren't. And then the third example is someone that said, who farted? That's probably the third one. But I think what I love about the way that you told that story, and look, you you have a little bit of just a nice little sprinkling of self-deprecation, which I feel is always important and keeps us grounded, is the fact that, you know, we're foolish or delusional, and maybe at best and at worst we're liars, if we think that we are just this, you know, this oracle of original ideas, that every time we open our mouths, only originality comes out. And I think the way that you've very, very honestly and I think smartly said there is, you know, what we're doing is we're putting our take, our spin, our packaging, our merchandising, our perspective, and I think being humble enough to kind of recognize that, you know, I mean, I think, who was it? Robert Collins said John Crapper didn't invent the toilet. He just worked to connect it, water and plumbing systems that were coming to cities. Okay, so, you know, and thank God we don't call it, I mean, we nickname it the crapper, but not the toilet. So there you go.
There it is.
There it is. So I want you to talk a little bit about the other two, you know, the books. I mean, because I love them. I mean, they're just not what I would have expected. I don't mean from you. I mean, in general, right? This idea about bravery and, you know, and the freak show Inherit the Earth. These are beautiful business books, but they're stories at the end of the day that can uplift us in this business.
It's, you know, the only real proper business book I wrote, and it's not really even that too, is Google Plus for Business. And that book, you know, if you really read it, there's hardly a lot to do with Google Plus. It's a lot about how maybe you should use social tools to do business. It's not about the tights is probably one of the best things I ever did for anybody, I feel, because what it did was say, you know, there's an actual functional way that you can work on your bravery. You know, bravery is one of these things we know we're supposed to have. You're supposed to be brave. That's what they tell you. Although they don't really back that up with a lot of really good examples. If you look at examples through time of bravery, they almost always involve someone being dead at the end of them. And so you have to value propositions, a little sketch still about that. But it's not about the tights. I figured it's just as simple as an acronym: CAPE: confidence, acceptance, permission, and execution. And I show how to walk through that. And by the way, after a little while, after you've kind of nailed permission, you throw it away and you put in another P, practice. And that's it. That's confident. That's how I did it. So that's how that book came about. The Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth, Wiley published. They probably regret that. But it was about the idea that entrepreneurship wasn't just two white guys shaking hands across the table. I really wanted to highlight that there were some really interesting, really colorful souls making interesting business happen, and that maybe it could be people with rainbow hair, and maybe it could be people with various different choices in life that were different than mine. And what I really also wrote it for is I tell people all the time, I wrote that book for my two kids because I know they're never going to have a normal mainstream job. And I feel that there needed to be a manual for people like that. And so I wrote that book. The other books that, you know, aren't shown, like the fitness one and all that, all those books, you know, it's always the same. I've only had one idea since, like, you know, I started blogging more for, you know, other people than myself, was be helpful. And so if I come up with something that I think can help other people, I go, hey, read this thing, it might be helpful. And then it's a book is just kind of like a unit of memory. And so I just stick that out there so that people can use it and gather around it.
Oh, I love that statement, right? A book is just a unit of memory. Because I think, you know, when I even think about my books, sometimes I tell them as chapters in a bigger story, and the story is still unfolding, and it allows me to almost put that little marker, that moment, and say, oh, that's where my head was at the time. That's what I was thinking. That's what meant something or was important to me. So that's a beautiful way of thinking. Yeah, thank you, Bob, who just said hashtag a unit of memory. Beautiful.
Oh, glad you spelled it out. I was like, Auntie who?
I also saw it. It wasn't Aunt Jemima. We know that. So it was a different auntie. So now, Chip, I butchered. What's going on with me? Chip says one of my favorite Brogan photos. Now, there are two things about this that are interesting. One is Flickr is still around.
Right.
And the other one is I can't see that photo, but here's a photo I can see. So I went down the Chris Brogan male model to the stars rabbit hole, and I remember this Chris Brogan. And then I saw some other Chris Brogans. This is the Chris Brogan that you see more or less in front of you. Was fascinated, intrigued as to the different hair colors. And then there was a third Chris Brogan, this Chris Brogan, that appeared April 4th. And you shaved your head, you shaved your face. Was it for a reason? But it was just a different version of your beautiful face that I'd never seen before, the baby face.
I do the baby face one every few years, and then everyone says stop, put the beard back, which I hear you. I do it the first time I did it, since sort of being Chris Brogan instead of just some stupid idiot who no one cared. I did it because this is such a pat on the back story. Back when there was the Ad Age Power 150, I always joked that if I ever beat Seth Godin to the #1 spot of the Ad Age Power 150, I would shave my head, like in homage to Seth Godin. Well, I finally did it, and I was at a client event, and Justin Levy, who worked with me at that time, said, well, got to shave your head. And the clients were like, oh, that's so funny, you're going to shave your head. And Justin goes, we should do it here. And all of a sudden, this went from funny to uh-oh. And then they ran out to like a Kmart or something and got clippers, and I was bald a little bit later. And by the way, like Seth went to #1 again the next day, and I felt really ripped off because I had already shaved all my hair off. And then I went back to #1 a few more times, and I said, I'm not doing it every time. Like, let's call it good. And then Ad Age Power 150 vanished, so who cares? So that was one. That time, April 2020, I had just cut my hair from those luxurious locks you saw. I had just cut them to kind of this middle, can I speak to your manager, Karen, kind of a cut, which was going to need a little grooming. Like along the way, I would need a barber to kind of fix this part on both sides because I get these Mickey Mouse Club ears. And that didn't happen because quarantine, and I couldn't convince Jessica, the woman who cuts my hair, I couldn't convince her to come over to my house. Creepy as that sounds and was intended, she wouldn't do it. And so I had very little choice. And so off I went and I shaved it, which got me back like 6 minutes of video prep in the morning because I could just show up. Who would know I didn't have bedhead. And that's how you get to me here, because it's just grown in a straight line ever since, because that's what happens with my hair. I don't have a choice, but 2 months and change in, here I am.
Now, we just got a news flash. Saul Colt says he is currently #9 on the Ad Age Power 150. So,
oh my gosh.
I'm thinking he might have an old copy. He could be looking at it upside down. We don't know. We just don't know. But wow, I remember that Power 150. I think I was on it. I hope I was on it.
You must have been, clearly. No question.
But, thankfully I never shaved my head. And I also remember hanging out with you and Justin in Vegas at CES. Those were some good times. Let me tell you. I think maybe you checked into hotels as Mickey Mouse, but we're not sure about that. But those were good times. Now, Chris, I want to move on to something else, which is in going down your Facebook feed, and I spent about 15 minutes on it. In order to find the baby face photo, I came across this post. The more I see some people self-promote, the sadder I know them to be. And I wanted to ask you what you meant by this, because I found it fascinating, because immediately, and this is the impact of it, I thought to myself, am I one of those people? I hope I'm not one of those people. Should I comment on that? And then there were people going, am I one of those people? And you were like, you're safe. But talk a little bit about this post, because it's amazing. Just a few words, white text on red background, and I think it really struck nerves.
I meant it to strike nerves. It's for lack of much more accuracy, it's a polemic of sorts. The intention is that I want people to go, got to think about that for a minute. And a real specific thing happened on Twitter. I see it happen a lot on Twitter with a particular individual who I follow, who maybe I shouldn't. I mean, maybe that would make it easier. But I watch this person very often retweet nice things other people say about them. And that doesn't benefit that other person. Like, no one sees a nice thing said. And, oh my gosh, Joseph is the most incredible and by the way, this is a true sentence. I'm going to use it in jest. Joseph's a very prepared guy and does a great deal of pre-work for this show. Now, that's almost worth sharing, Joseph, because, in that way, like that's saying for any future guests, there you go. That's, future guests would understand that at least if you go on the show, you're going to get value. You will derive value from the experience. But when people share like these links that are like, oh my gosh, your book is, I'm just going to dig right into a thing you do now, right? Like it benefits zero humans except for the person receiving it. So what you're supposed to do is, put that in your little spank bank of self-adulation and run away and go, oh, they like me. But what you don't do is share it. It doesn't make anything better. It's odd and awkward. So when I say this, we have to promote ourselves, right? We have to promote our shows. We have to promote the things that we need people to come and look at. That's not what I mean. Like someone said, well, I'm a YouTuber. Should I be saying like and subscribe? And, sure, if it makes you cheery. It's really weird. You know how people choose to like and subscribe a video? They think it. They push it. And yes, I did. I think that when we are feeling lonely and when we are feeling sad and when we are feeling that sense that maybe we're not as successful as we want to be right now, or nobody loves me, or the worst one, they're all forgetting about me. That's when we get that urge to like scratch our own back with that sort of a thing. But it's never the real solution to that problem. The real solution is get out and make something so interesting that people share it again. Make it so communicating, to the thing that someone feels that they want to be part of it and that they want to be, brought into it, right? The thing we learned when we were 7, 8, 9 years old is that you can have so much fun by yourself, but if you want to play with other children, you have to share the ball. You have to let someone else be Superman sometimes. You have to make someone else the hero in that story, right? You can't. What a storyline that's coming out now. By the way, this is me my whole life, Joseph. I'll say things I think are so prescient and important, and I'll make a dumb joke, and the joke is the story. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking, is I think that when we worry about whether or not they still love me anymore, it's a waste of our energy, because we could just go make them love us again some more if we just did something else.
And the truth though is that they do love you because they're loving you right now. It comes back to that old statement, which is, look, I would rather people laugh with me, but I would prefer them to laugh at me than not to laugh at all. And so in this particular case, this is life, right? This is what it's about. And I put that quote in there, or that post in there for a reason, because I think the advice to people, rather than self-congratulate and self-promote and self-inflate, is to share and to create. And you are what I would call, I coined the phrase, which means, if you've been listening to this episode, that I didn't coin it, I'm just taking credit for coining it, the idea of a streamie. You, myself, Saul, Laura, we're all streaming, and some of us have never done it before, like myself. Some have done it before, but you are streaming every single day at 10 a.m. and your show is called very cleverly Catch Up. And I think that's the point, Chris, right? You're not, when you do a show that is guest centric, how can it be about you anymore? For before Kerry Gorgone showed me StreamYard and suddenly everyone got shown StreamYard, I was doing it by myself, and I was doing a lot more solo shows, and partly because that was an easier way to deal with that technology wise, but partly just because I thought, well, I can come up with a topic 10 or 12 minutes long every day. I'll do that. I'll just get out there that way. But it's, if anyone knows me for any amount of time, it is really about, for me, not even like sharing the greatness about one person, but making sure that person gets connected into a wider circle. I always want to extend the circle. I always want it to be like capoeira or something. I always want it to be like there's more people coming into this play, right? And I think that as I'm working towards
this new book I'm working on called The Backpack, as I'm working towards some of the ideas in there. One of them is that you have to really kind of nail down your own story, but then the very next thing you have to do is introduce that story to others, and make it participate with other people's stories, because the thing isn't the story. The thing is the jam. The thing is the two stories. It's Joseph and Chris. That's how it works the best. And I guess that's what I'm prepping people for.
And it's also obviously the dynamic, the chemistry, their interaction. I mean, I found my own journey doing this is the more, whilst I might prepare in terms of visual aids or in terms of things to discuss, the best shows have almost no show notes whatsoever, or just 3 things I'd like to hit, and then just let And I've always said, if you can't be interesting for 30 minutes as a guest, or if you can't as a host find interesting things to say with your guest, then what's the point of anything at the end of the day? You're just not listening hard enough, or you're not trying hard enough.
There's no end of the possibilities for fascination, and I know this to be true of you. I know that if you were, I don't know, you lost your cell phone, you're down to just the last 20 in your pocket, and you have to take public transit somewhere, and you were sitting on a bus stool. There's a lot of prep work just to say one simple point, and you're on that stool. I know you will engage the person beside you in a conversation. I know that before the second or third bus stop, you will have learned some very interesting things about the person. You'll know what they like to make for dinner when a guest comes. And, I know this to be true because I've just seen it so many times. And that's you. And that's how you bring that kind of energy to people. And I think that in our line of work, especially, we forget and we think we're supposed to talk about us. But it's always more interesting when we find out stuff about the other person and then kind of relate, find those things. When we were in the pre-show and I just sort of threw lekker out there, I threw it out there to like, Joseph, I know a slang, that's all I did with that. And it was because some weirdo in Edinburgh taught me that one day, before I gave my speech. That's how it works.
Well, in South Africa, they would say lekker soos 'n cracker. But I suppose that may not fly as much in the United States at this present moment in time. So we're going to strike that. But you're right about me, and the anecdote that you just said is exactly what, relating to that point. My kids always say, Dad, why do you always talk to strangers? We could be anywhere and you're just striking up a conversation. And I go, because you can learn so much from them. It's just such a wonderful moment to find something in common and build off there and surprise yourself and make someone happy. And it's funny that you saw that, or you picked up on that. AKA,
I've seen it in action so many times.
Well, they call it verbal diarrhea, and I think there is medicine for it, but we're working on it. We started talking just now about stories, and I've been looking at some of the comments. Robert said, as storytellers, we should leverage our platform to give voice to others so we can learn and connect others together. But you've built and are building a system called story leading, and that's why my background is my homage to you and to story leading. Immediately, I was so interested, because what's the difference between storytelling and story leading? And I would love for you to talk a little bit about this concept, this platform, this system.
The primary thing I want to show leaders in organizations, and by the way, if you think about it, I've done a lot of my work talking to marketers and sales types and that sort of people, PR people, and I've spent so much, 15 or more years talking to them. I wanted to switch to talk to leaders. Oh wow, hey Dean. I wanted to talk to leaders because I think that there's a lot of crossover anyway. I think communication is communication, internally or otherwise. But I feel that there's a lot of remote education going on, for instance. There's a lot of opportunities where now that we're doing work from home and that sort of a thing, there's a lot of times where leaders have the opportunity to convey more than just an objective to people. And I think that right now, there's a crisis of personal leadership going on. We people working from home, if we're like at some company, don't fully know what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that we, the bosses who have to lead these people, aren't really clear on what has to happen. And what I say about, story is that people kind of vaguely remember numbers, but they always remember story. They'll definitely, something visual, something kind of a little more image to it. So I came up with 3 types of stories that people tell the most in a business. The first is called mission stories, like a mission statement, but they're stories that keep reinforcing the mission. Disney's goal is to show an amazing guest experience, start to finish. So every time you go to Disney, all the people around, everybody, the trash picker upper, everybody has to be thinking guest experience the whole time, because they keep telling those kinds of stories to reinforce it. So that's mission. Second stories are belonging stories. Stories about belonging are any story in which you kind of reiterate why everyone feels like they should belong there. We're the kind of company who. We're the kind of people who believe. Harley Davidson riders, the lion's share of people who love Harley Davidson are also like accountants and lawyers. They're not gang people. They're people who have this energy and this spirit about them, who feel like they belong because of X. I drink out of a hydro flask, not because I'm a Visco girl, but because I like that idea that maybe I'm helping the planet in some way, drinking out of my little metal thing. The third kind of stories are called growth stories. And growth stories are basically any story growth is split in half. One half is basic straight line, motivational speaker type stories. And the second are somewhat corrective stories that we tell to make sure that people can align with the mission and the belonging stories, right? A growth story would be, we say here the family is very important. And I know that you've been dealing with a lot of family stuff going on, but we really have to talk about the fact that when you take these actions and aren't here as often, other people can't serve their family as much because they have to pick up the extra time that you're chewing on. So maybe we can collaborate as a family and find a solution for how we're going to manage your time, right? So that's a corrective story, but it helps them grow. And so those are the kinds of stories I'm trying to show leaders how to teach with Story Leader. And then I guess sort of a side note to all of that is I'm teaching what's called narrative and contextual analysis, which is what story do we tell now that we have this new information? In PR, that's used all the time, right? What's our positioning to this story? That's PR. So I'm just teaching it as a leadership tool because I don't think leaders do that very much. Leaders think of PR as a thing that you throw to the press, not a very vital tool for how we do our business.
There's a very interesting thing, that I want to build upon based on what you just said, because when the new information comes to the forefront, it is that fork in the road, that moment of truth, and companies and leaders have to decide how they want to address it. Do they want to ignore it? Do they want to sweep it under the rug? Do they want to pretend it doesn't exist, like Black Lives Matter, or do they want to address it in the most awkward and uncomfortable way because they have no basis to actually incorporate that? And I think what I take away from that is one of these best practices, which is okay to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, we're not sure, we're we're just actually not really, we're going to tell you that we're trying to understand, we're trying to listen, we're trying to learn, and we'll come back to you with something when we feel we have something worthy of your time and your respect.
There's a lot of things that are happening now that haven't happened in the history of the world. One is that so many companies are suddenly, the employees are all protesting which clients the company has. So for instance, there's massive petitions at places like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and saying, stop working with police forces. Like that never happened before. Employees went to work and did their dumb job. And, every now and again you hated a certain client, but that's not how it worked. And now it's just a massive shift of mindset. And so I think there's just so many times right now. There's so many times where we're operating from a different playbook and it's not really been written. And I think we all have a chance to come in and write it in pencil, at least for right now, or perhaps crayon.
Oh, there you go. I've got to pay you $1 now, right? We've had many crayon reunions. We have Greg Vadino on Friday. We've had Scott Monty, we've had CC Chapman. It's been awesome, and we've had Sheldon Neville. So we've been talking about maybe a Zoom reunion. I don't know, whatever.
Zoom union, yeah. It's a
Zoom union. A Zoom
I can bring
union.
my action figure.
Who's that? That's you, right?
That's a Chris Brogan action figure that CC Chapman gave me, which I think was a crayon project. But
that might have
country
been
music.
That might have been you in Second Life. I want to just touch on a few things as we kind of continue this idea of stories. Robert said the focus of the hero's journey should always be about showcasing something. I guess what he meant, someone else's moments, struggles, and victories. And I think I love this because I think it really gets to the heart. It's almost like a red thread throughout this whole conversation about self-promotion, about streaming, about helping as new selling, about telling stories, when it's not just about us anymore, and when we really are focused on others. It's quite liberating.
No question. It's Donald Miller from Story Brand says that we should stop trying so hard to be Luke Skywalker. We should try to be Yoda. And that's the smartest, easiest way to think about it. We should be Yoda. We should be empowering our heroes with tools. My quote like that is, no matter what, make your buyer the hero. And I think that, any which way, any which language we want to take it in, it goes back to the thing I just said of when you're playing with kids and toys, kids, we all want a chance to be the winner in the story. And we kind of forget that when we're little kids. Hopefully as grownups, we remember that the more we can help the people that we're helping sell or any of these other business functions we have, the better we're going to have a chance to deliver some great deal of value as opposed to shine the light back on ourselves. By the way, if you spend so much time shining the light on yourself, all you really get is your eyes don't work as well.
And which is probably why I'm wearing glasses, but I
I have two really bright LED lights as I'm saying that, so it's kind of almost humorous.
And speaking of toys, we have to just quickly look at the toys in your background. So that is that's not Kermit Roosevelt III, is it though?
That's not Kermit Roosevelt. I wished I had a Kermit Roosevelt. There's a few Batmen. I do sort of like that Caped Crusader. Groot. This is really fun trying to do this reverse.
Yeah, you got it.
K2SO from Star Wars Rogue One, played by Alan Tudyk. I thought he was great. That's a Minecraft creeper. I totally forget some anime kid. And that's actually one of my kids' ones. And some dog that I just thought was funny looking because he's googly. It's from some video game.
Very cute. Now, I have one more thing to share, or one more thing I want to discuss with you. But first, I've been playing a little bit of a game with my guests, which is I come up with a quote, and they have to guess who said the quote. And just to set this up, chances are you won't guess, which doesn't mean it's a trick question, except, in the case of, I had Laura Gassner-Otting, it was her own quote. So she got that. That wasn't, if it had fooled her, then it would have been a problem. But she clearly got her own quote because it's on her website. But I just thought this was a really beautiful way to encapsulate the art, the craft of storytelling, but also the authenticity associated with real storytellers. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you.
And I'm to guess who said that?
Yeah, and very quickly you can say, I have no idea, which would probably be exactly what you should say, unless
I have a feeling that's something he would say. It's sort of right up his alley. Could be Guy Fieri.
It is actually close. It's Maya Angelou. But isn't it a beautiful quote? I just thought I would, for me, it's the quote and the person who said the quote that I then attached to my guest.
She was the first poet laureate that I ever knew about in the United States. Like, I didn't realize that had been a post for a very long time. But President William Jefferson Clinton, I might point out, made her the poet laureate of the United States. But I did not know that was her quote. It's
a beautiful one, nonetheless. Wouldn't you say? So we had a few more comments, and basically Kerry said, "Don't quit your day job at least to become a meteorologist. You can do many things, Chris, but the green screen, it's tough. Like if I was to reach for the shark's tail now, I would have to be intuitive. I would have to use my right hand and I would almost have been right, but it's very backwards, and I'm never going to figure it out anytime soon.
It's crazy.
So I wanted to,
intuitively we know where it is, but you really have to tell your brain, think about this a second. Yeah, it's interesting.
So now if I go to the fireball, see, messed up. It had to be closer to my.
This could be a whole game.
I know. So I'm going to try it once more with you, which is we're going to go full screen, and I'm going to ask you to immediately point to Kermit's eye. Kermit's
eye. Ready? Oh, not bad.
Perfect. That's bullseye. Well done.
Not
See,
bad.
You're getting better. Chris,
Wait,
I wanted. Yeah.
I have a business technical question that ruins the entire fabric of this show, Joseph. How are you talking off screen, which is what they say I can't do?
I mean, I wish I could tell you that I did something. All I did. Oh, I know. I'll show you later. But all you got to do is when you. Oh, I'm still off screen. There we go. But I think you've. So
but no, because if I pull me out of the stream, the way I do that on mine, I pull myself out of the stream, and it says no one can hear you.
No, you don't remove yourself. What you do is on the little banner of your guest.
Yeah.
There's a tiny little icon of a head of the little
just
circle.
The one.
Yeah, and then you click on it. It's called solo layout, and so now I haven't removed myself from the stream. This is the voice of God, Chris. You have been
very
chosen.
helpful, Joseph. This whole show's been fun, but now also educational. Thank you.
Chris, I am your father. Okay, so I've got one more thing that I wanted to share with you, which is I just came across this when I was doing a little bit of research, and I just thought it'd be great to end because it's so valuable, it's so important, and the advice I think is just very pertinent, which is you were interviewed and it was by Intelligent IQ, and you came out with the 7 stops. And I read them and I was like, this is really cool stuff. Chris should talk about them. And I'll just you can pull anyone out you want. But there were just a few interesting things, from stop reading books because, here we are, you and I as authors and writers of books, you're telling people, you're saying, what to do. What is that?
So that one's an easy one. I think that, you probably hear this a lot too. Someone will say some really lovely thing to you. They'll be like, Joseph, I love your book. It really changed my life. Really gave me some new perspective. And now I'm reading this book. And you're like, why didn't you just do stuff with the book I just wrote for you? Why didn't you just run off into those bushes and do some things? So anyway, I think it's strange how people do that. I mean, they're all kind of fun. Stop consuming world news. Oh my gosh, I could say that these days. I don't know how long ago this one was, but we're all kind of binging a wee bit too much on that.
2014, by the way. You wrote that in 2014. Talk about being a pioneer.
That's amazing. So, no, I think they're all true.
So I want to touch on the final 2. Stop answering that you're busy. People who aren't busy are busy wishing they were busy. I mean, so this is so important because in my keynote today, I spoke about introspecting during the great pause. Number 1, survive. Number 2, get to the fact that your email probably sucks, your content sucks, your website sucks, your advocacy sucks, etc. And the question that I was asked is, but how do we make the time? How do we find the time? And I said to them, you always have time. You just need to figure out how to use that time or multitask. But if you could talk to that very briefly, and then we'll touch on the final one.
I just think it's such a bore. I think it's a bore that everyone says how busy they are. They're not busy. Everyone lies. They're either so not busy and wish they were, or they have no idea how to manage their time. Richard Branson runs 400 companies, and he's far less busy than everybody who tells me how busy they are. That's all I have there.
Yeah, no, and that's all you need. And then the final one is just this idea of stop spending time writing hateful, angry, snarky thoughts. Who does it help? Talk to that, and then I'll remind you maybe of a post that you wrote. Yeah,
I love this setup. Yeah, so I always tell people that the advice I give is the advice I need.
Right, which we never discussed before.
Perfect. It's I think that it's so easy to write grumpy things, and I'm a villain. I write grumpy things. I do it plenty. I shouldn't. I write things like, the more I see some people self-promote, the sadder I know them to be, which is a snarky thing to say. I every day meditate, and I every day think, I could be better at some things. And that's really low on my list of things I want to make better about myself, but I sometimes like to put some energy towards that and not be snarky or negative towards other people.
Well, the thing that we discussed in advance was just this idea that, listen, we're works in progress. We're trying. We're constantly striving to be better, and I think that's definitely changed. I mean, I think we have changed in that regard, right, Chris? Which is the fact that we're saying things like that, knowing that we could be called out, but it's all part of this reflective, and I think this process of us being better. And I feel it in you. I see it. I think anyone who's streaming and recognizes, even though the bar has been lowered, it's so much easier to do, but we're still learning. Like, you didn't learn how to do the voice of God.
Right.
And it's awesome, right?
I feel a changed man.
So nice to hang out with you. I mean, it's just amazing to think that we spent about 40 minutes plus 45 minutes just together, right? Just talking, chatting,
right,
interacting with people, which is a big part of it. But this has been a real gift. So thank you.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, and I'm so lucky and blessed. So thank you for having me on. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for all the level of preparation that you do for every one of your guests.
It's the least I can do.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.